the slides.
I mean, Retro can do an intro and then we share.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to the 9th episode of Focus On. I'm Retro, contributor with the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit, and as usual, I'm joined by Juan, our facilitator. Today, we're excited to host the Dai Foundation for a Core Unit update. We are joined by the facilitator, Søren Nielsen, as well as two Dai Foundation board members, Hans and Payam. So, gentlemen, if you'd like, Hans, please take. I'm sorry, Søren, please take it away from here.
Sure, and let me get the slides up. Share something. Screen, and here we go. So yeah, thanks Retro and Juan for hosting us for this update. That really helps us a lot to get this assistance. And I am sitting here with my Mac, so I can see the slides. I can't see anything else happening, but I know we have a good set of hosts that will let me know if there's anything popping up. What we would like to go through in this spot on session is there's kind of two parts. One is kind of talking about what happened last quarter, what are we going to do in the next, and before that we really also need to recap what is Dai Foundation, because there's again a lot of different interpretations of that. And then in the second half, which really is, we're very excited to be able to talk about that, is talking about what does it take to be a board member in the Dai Foundation, because we certainly are looking to supplement the board with board members that are kind of appointed by Maker Governance to kind of make sure that we have good inclusion there. So that's what we have on the agenda, and we really hope that we also will get some good questions and anything people may be wondering about that can come forward, so we can kind of have a dialogue about that. All right, then. Why is it we actually do have something called Dai Foundation as something in the Maker ecosystem? And to put it in a nutshell, there really are three main reasons. First of all, it's hugely important that when there is Dai on some kind of chain, that is not just somebody creating a token and calling it Dai. Or somebody, if somebody launches a MakerDAO on some other blockchain, we have to be sure that it actually is the right Dai, the right Maker. So to be able to assure that, we need to have a recognized owner of the trademark so we can go out and defend them. And we actually also right now have a case where we got a notice about a potential infringement, and we're looking into that. So clearly there needs to be a legal entity that can go out in the old traditional world and fight somebody who may infringe on the trademarks. The next point is we also have some very valuable open source software in the protocol, and to again make sure that this public good only is used for the purpose of MakerDAO and not someone else kind of taking the software, making it closed source, or kind of combining it in ways that are not desired by the principles that the protocol lives after. We must be able to also protect the copyright of the software, and all the software that has gone into to the multi-collateral Dai that we have now. That all the software that Maker Foundation developed when it bootstrapped it, all that copyright now sits with Dai Foundation, and our work is also to kind of assure that the software going into the future also have its copyright being maintained by the Dai Foundation, so we can protect it and it's not split out across a lot of different actors that each and individually cannot do much to protect it. And then finally, let's wish it never happens, but should there come a day where there is some kind of attack and what we call a governance attack, then we must also have this ability to assure that if somebody go out and in some kind of manner get an MKR vote majority or do something else where they can take control of what's happening on the blockchain, then we must make sure that that it's not, they don't take over the control of the trademarks. So there really is also this reason why it has to be an independent entity. So it only can act according to its mandates, which is to follow the original principles that was agreed for MakerDAO. Dai Foundation in itself is created to safeguard what cannot be decentralized. Because again, if it was something that could be decentralized, then we wouldn't have a quote-unquote single point of failure or a centralization point. So again, it is the intellectual property of the maker community that Dai Foundation safeguards. As I mentioned, it's an independent legal entity and it's a non-profit and has a very narrow mandate to serve. Further on, it was created in Denmark, and one of the reasons for that is really that Denmark has a very strong legal framework for independent foundations, and they have been known and legally accepted for centuries. So it's not like it's something that where things may change or we may see some sudden shifts. And just also quickly to recap, what kind of IP is it then Dai Foundation holds? Again, the flagship are the trademarks, the Maker and Dai trademarks, and then the associated internet domains that kind of utilizes the trademark names in some kind of way. The most known, the MakerDAO.com. In addition, there also is some key communication channels. We do have the Discord for the internal and governance work. We do have Twitter, which luckily now have gotten live again and is operational. But we also do have a MakerDAO Telegram handle. We do have other social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, and so on, which we hope soon also will get to life by somebody from the core units being ready to take content ownership of it. And then finally, we do also have some logos and some other material that point up to the trademarks. The other kind of IP we hold, that's the software part, where everything that is a dependency for having the core Maker protocol work well as some kind of software that doesn't necessarily have to be designated as a piece of the protocol, but it is something that clearly supports the protocol. That is also something that we can take copyright ownership of. And let me re-emphasize what we also have been saying on all the other calls we have been having. The intent is not to kind of sit and make it difficult to use this as long as it's been used for what is the purpose of MakerDAO. The intent is the community can use the Maker IP without any hindrance for anything that is legitimate. And I think we also proved that in the trademark policy that was published almost a year ago, where again, as long as you use it for a number of well-described purposes, you don't even have to ask for any kind of approval or anything like that. So it's spelled out quite clearly how you can go about it and use it, and hopefully that makes it as frictionless as possible. So that was very, very fast. Just a recap of why do we have Dai Foundation and what IP does it safeguard. Then we also do have, there is a distinguishment between Dai Foundation and the Dai Foundation Core Unit, which I, beside being the chair of the Dai Foundation board, then I'm also the facilitator. And the Dai Foundation Core Unit, that is kind of part of the other core unit structure that we do have in MakerDAO, where the Dai Foundation Core Unit, that is the vehicle that kind of enables the practical implementation of the critical services that Dai Foundation provides to the DAO. And when I say critical services, that is again making sure that all the IP we have people who want to create content for it can get the access as approved by Maker Governance, and then can get the access without any undue bureaucracy or technical snafu. And that obviously, requires some resources. We are, as mentioned, we also are out there to protect the trademarks, which means we need some legal assistance and besides the practical one. And Dai Foundation Core Unit is kind of the vehicle that provides these and receives funding from MakerDAO in return for that. So that kind of hopefully just sets the context. Now let's then go over and talk a little bit about what happened in Q1 from the Dai Foundation Core Unit. We had when Maker Foundation dissolved, Dai Foundation kind of took over a lot of IP, also some temporary caretaking, for example, of the MakerDAO website and other stuff. And what we've been working together with GovAlpha, or actually driven by GovAlpha, is to get a process for how can you actually get Maker governance approval for taking content ownership of one of the assets. So if, for example, I want to, say start utilize being the maintainer of the MakerDAO website, then there is a clearly described process that's called MIP 60, which describes how you have to go about to get that access. And it is, I would say, low friction, because you publish your desire, and then if there are no objections after a period, you actually have the rights to become a content owner of the said asset. And that now works. We are still working to kind of make sure that the current asset allocations are also reflected in GitHub. We do have an asset registry in Google Sheets. And what we also are working with TechOps to set up in this area is an automated process when you want to have updates after you've been given content access. That could be, for example, if you could have gotten access to a subdomain like auctions.makerdao.com, and you really want to move that to another platform, such a thing as updating the IP target. How do you go about that? And for that, we are together with TechOps creating a form-based solution where you go in, enter your request, and by that we do have a centralized audit trail of what's happening, and then TechOps can go about. Either if there is a policy, they can do it without any interference, or otherwise Dai Foundation will approve the change, and then it will be implemented right away. So that was one of the big things on a lot of CU's mind in half a year ago, and I think we come a long way. There's still a little bit to do, but it is now really on the to-do list what we need to do there. And again, I'm always looking for feedback on whether people think there is something that is too difficult, or whether they lack information, because we do have a lot of information in the DAO, and sometimes it can be difficult to really find out what you need to do and who to contact. So if there's anything we can do better in communicating about this, please let us know. Now, what we then will kind of focus on in the coming quarter is, besides just giving access to the IP we already have, then it is also to assure that what new IP is being created using MakerDAO funding, that actually also is kind of being maintained as a public good and not going into some kind of individual's ownership. One of the things we are doing in connection with that is to actually clean up the MakerDAO GitHub, which is one of the tools we are caretaking. So we and also enable it so it's kind of whenever you submit something for a repository in the MakerDAO GitHub, then you also assign the copyright for that asset to the Dai Foundation. So that's some of the future tasks. The task will also include, when we talk about the MakerDAO GitHub, to clean it up. There is a lot of old unused repositories, and then classify the repositories we do have in the GitHub, because those repositories that's simply used for software development don't really need oversight from Dai Foundation, but some of the repositories are also used actually to produce content and publish content from. And those repositories will be treated like any kind of other asset that needs to have a content manager, and they will also allocating assets to those will also go through the same process, the MIP60 process, and then once it's allocated.
Whoop, I think something happened. He's breaking out, right?
Yeah, let's just wait for Søren to get back online.
Oh, he left.
May take.
Let's just continue. I think I was up next, wasn't I?
Yeah, and I have the slides here. Give me 1 second to get them on screen.
Oh.
Good to have a backup plan.
This is unlike Søren Peter.
Yeah, maybe just continue, Payam, and then we can follow up with and also see there's a lot of question in that we want to go to. So let's continue and keep the momentum.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having us, and thank you for participating here. Just a quick intro. My name is Payam Samarghandi, and I'm a lawyer based here in Denmark, partner in Samarghandi, which is specialized in crypto. And I have been working in the space since 2016, where I first met the people behind the Maker project, and been providing legal advice to them ever since. So basically, I was also one of the people behind setting up this foundation here in Denmark, and this is also the reason why I'm sitting here at the board. I'm here to share some general notes in terms of what is a Danish foundation, what are the principles, and what are the traits behind a foundation. And needless to say, if you have any questions, just feel free to shoot them. Well, first of all, the one primary trait of a foundation here in Denmark is that such foundation is self-owned. Like, we have no shareholders or some other people or companies that are that have an ownership in the foundation. We have been founded by a legal entity, the Maker Foundation back then, which set the statutes. But besides that, there's nobody really to control us. We are controlled by the statutes today. So this also means that we have no shares that can be issued or can be traded or something like that. Our mandate is formalized in our statutes, period. Whatever is said in the statutes, that's what really regulates us, and whatever activities we are providing needs to fall under those statutes. And then the next question from your side probably is, can those statutes be changed? Like, when we were set up by the Maker Foundation, there was a purpose. Like, what is the purpose of the Dai Foundation? Like Søren Peter said, that we are to carry out the IP rights behind Maker in fully accordance with some certain principles. Those principles are stated in that statutes, and those cannot be changed ever, period. And if you want to see the statutes, there are a link in the presentation, and they are to be accessed through our page. So who supervises that whatever the board is doing is in fully accordance with those statutes? There we have the Danish Foundation authorities. They are supervising on a regular basis. Each calendar year, they carry out a fully legal inspection where they go through our minutes, our budgets, the way we spend our money, and so forth. And they runningly assess if whatever we are doing are to be done in fully accordance with the statutes. Yes. Could we continue to the next slide? Thanks. So there are like two kinds of foundations here in Denmark, a commercial and a non-commercial foundation here in Denmark. The Dai Foundation has been set up as a non-commercial. This means that we are not profit-oriented. We are not set in the world to create profit to anybody. What we are doing, and that's actually an easy thing, is to spend money. We have no revenue, and we have an obligation to pay out grants. And when I'm saying this is also like whoever is sitting out there considering to create a project, have an idea, whatever that could be, and seeks for some economical financials, feel free to reach out. We are here and we are obliged to pay out grants, and we actually do want to pay out grants. So feel free to just send us an email or shoot us on the forum. That was it from my side. And I know, Henrik, you have some slides in continuation here of, and
yeah, I can continue. We do have some interesting questions, so maybe we should just speed ahead and then take all of the question in one go in a Q&A session.
Yes.
Yeah, just quickly. My name is Henrik Hoffmeyer. I sit on the board as well. I have a background from IT as well as most people have. More than 2 decades, I believe, with IBM and Oracle. And but since 2007, I've been building fintech companies. Got involved in Bitcoin in 2012, very early. Founded Coinify together with my business partner, which is one of the payment companies in the world. I think we operate in 178 countries now, and sold it to Voyager recently. I was also part of one of the first central bank digital currency transactions with Swiss National Bank, where we bought an iPad using a central bank digital currencies in a pilot in Switzerland. I was invited to the board, and I'm very grateful for that, but also believe that I can bring a lot of competences, let's say, from my background. I've been sitting on boards for many years, and I can say it's somewhat different It's somewhat different with a board of trustee rather than a board of directors as you would normally have in a company. But the same responsibilities apply. And here I've just put up some keywords. So if some of you are considering to apply to become a member, we would happily encourage everyone. We are, and our responsibility is to continuously look to provide for the best board possible within the purpose that Payam went through just before. But it's also important to say that it carries responsibility. So I think the purpose in the board of trustees is, of course, to advise and govern and, let's say, oversee the purpose. But also, let's say, direct and assist in the leadership. And that is, let's say, where everyone has a responsibility in the board and also together in the board. Of course, you need to know the Dai Foundation purpose and core principles, and you need to live up to those principles. Otherwise, you do not deserve to be on this board. But it also carries responsibilities, and in principle, we are ultimately responsible, not just as a let's say as an entire board. We are also individually responsible, and that also means that we need to exercise our own individual opinion in the board and not just reach consensus in every situation. That's where a board differs from a management in a company. You actually do have responsibility also as an individual. You also are responsible to contribute, clearly, but it is actually a responsibility that you have to contribute. And that could also include, let's say, have oversight of ethical values, financial management, promotion, fundraising. That does not mean that you as an individual board member needs to exercise your abilities everywhere, but our chairman, which is Søren Peter, will delegate to those in the board who has the best experience in that particular area. And that is the chairman's role, is to get the board of trustees to work in the best and most efficient manner. Therefore, we also have some required experience. We believe it's important that people are experienced when joining the board, otherwise they don't understand the responsibilities they are assuming. But we are also flexible in the sense, and so we would require ideally, and then of course some of the things can also be evaluated on an individual basis, but we would like to see documented experience from similar positions, so an individual knows how to work in the board. Maybe you have practiced the same responsibilities in another role, but at least you would have some years of experience. Legal and regulatory oversight or insight is very important, not just to be a lawyer like Payam, but you should also, on an individual basis, actually understand, let's say, the relevant legal frameworks. Yeah, then I would just mention that we do have bylaws, policies, procedures, like any other, you can say, board or company. And it is also the responsibility not only to read it, but also to understand it and also exercise what it says, because that was the purpose of the foundation from the very beginning. And this is our governing document. And to Payam's point, we don't have shareholders to be responsible to. We have the fund to be responsible to, or the foundation. Yeah, so financial legal education is highly recommended. Let's move to the next slide. So if you are to be appointed, and here I can just speak for ourselves and us who sits on the board, we are responsible in the position. So of course you would need to keep yourself updated on everything happening in our sector. And of course you cannot be aware of everything, but at least you should, let's say, spend time on constantly being up to date. And that takes time. You have to participate. So participation is also super important. And we assume that there is participation in all board meetings and so on and so forth, and that you can actually allocate the time required. And that can be sometimes peak and troughs. Sometimes there's a lot of work, sometimes there's less. In principle, the Dai Foundation should have as little work as possible. That's not what we have seen. We have actually seen that there's a lot more work than maybe initially anticipated. But the Dai Foundation, ideally over time, should be less and less active, because it's also a let's say, signal of let's say, what's happening in the community, and is there actually something to be aware of. We're also saying here, experience and knowledge to the organization. Yeah, then there is the conflict of interest. So one of the challenges, at least I've seen, I've been on boards for the last 15 years. Sometimes people cannot recognize when they are conflicted themselves in their own interest. I think it's super important to understand what conflict of interest means. I would recommend that you have some sort of education as well. Maybe if you take a leadership or an education role in board leadership, that will teach you some of the principles that you need to be aware of. And of course, respect confidentiality and so on and so forth. Personally, As I said before, you are responsible as an entire board, but you're also responsible as a person. You're also responsible for bringing, let's say, your own skills and knowledge and experience to the table in a value creation manner. And that's super important. And that's also why we don't want to have a board which is just a lot of lawyers. Sorry, Payam, but having the same people on the board does not make sense. And that is Søren's most important role, is to actually assemble a board that complement each other and that we have overlapping and individual skills. And therefore, you would also, as an individual, be responsible to bring your skills and experience to the table, and everybody else will rely on you to bring those skills to the table. Yeah, and then there is some preparation work as always. What else are we writing here? Yeah, and then there's transparency. No, I've only have two more points to make. Being on a board like this is special, and I would say that it also requires, let's say, maybe more work than the pay, or more work than maybe what would be normally required. So you also need to have open eyes before you even apply, because you also need to be able to commit. There's no, let's say, going back if you commit. We would want you to stay on for years. We're not looking to replace every 6 months. The second point I want to make is that imagine that the Dai Foundation, and I think we have explained it before, it's like a foundation that sleeps when everything is going well, but has to activate if it's not. So if there is a conflict, if there is a situation, and there can be many situations, then it has to activate on a very short notice and be very active. And that is the challenge here, is maybe there are some periods where it doesn't require so much work, and then you have to be very active. And we are also in the periods, we're also preparing through so-called war games, where we take various scenarios and then we prepare as a board. Okay, so what happens in a forking situation? What do we do? What would we have to make in terms of decisions and so on? And those types of war games also requires, let's say, work and thinking, but it's all in order to prepare for those happenings, which hopefully doesn't happen, where the Dai Foundation has to be activated. So those were some of the words, and I can see that there is a lot of questions that has been brought to the table. I don't know if the moderator wants to take one question at a time, and then we can try to answer.
I know Søren Peter. I think he's waiting to get back in.
Is it possible to bring him in?
We invited Søren to the main stage, but I don't think that he's
with us right now. I think.
I don't see him accepting the invitation.
Yeah, I can see he's there, but maybe you have to invite him as a speaker to the stage, or maybe you have to.
I'm just learning Crowdcast. Thanks.
We all are.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so, maybe Søren, you can continue where I left off.
Yes, I certainly can, and apologies. I don't know what happened to my fucking internet here, but I understand that I almost was through before Payam should go on. So I've been browsing the questions. They're not related to the board so far, so I suggest the moderators they bring up the questions once we've gone through it, and we take them one by one. So in the meantime, yeah, now you got a taste of what it needs if for a board member, for a person to be a board member at the Dai Foundation board. So what are we doing next to kind of extend the board? We certainly want to continue talking about what it takes and gain some interest, and we also do hope that we can have more interest from having the board out there at events to meet people. We are planning and hoping to be able to have the several people from the board to come to Paris for the ECC conference at an event. And then as we hopefully get a lot of interested and qualified candidates, then we'll look to see how big the interest is, and then discuss with GovAlpha which process to use going forward. Because if there's a lot of interest, then it is up to Maker Governance to kind of do some kind of selection. If it's perhaps just what kind of amounts to what we need, then it could perhaps be some kind of ratification process. What is the case here is, again, 2 of the board members on the Dai Foundation board have to be Maker Governance appointed, and in that sense, there needs to be some kind of measure of Maker Governance, either selection or ratification. So we have with this call today, we have kind of kicked off that process, and we do really hope that we get a lot of interest and kind of find a way where we can kind of make it crystal clear what it takes and get a lot of interest on that. So with that, let's take the next slide. And now we come to ask the board anything. And yeah, for that, let's go back and take the questions that came into the chat. If either Retro or Søren, you will moderate here, then we can jump in.
Yeah, this is great. So the first question is from Tadeo. He's asking, is all the work done with Maker funding considered a public good?
Well, that is still something for Maker to kind of decide, and it has been discussed in the Discord, in the Dai Foundation public channel, where I kind of say as the facilitator for Dai Foundation, but also as a MKR owner, I do think unless there are particular reasons for why it shouldn't be, then whatever the DAO is funding should be a public good. And in that sense, yeah, IP should should be assured that it can continue to be a public good, and then ownership should be transferred to the Dai Foundation. There certainly can be specific cases where it kind of makes sense from a business point of view to kind of make a joint venture or anything like that. If that is the case, then certainly in special cases that there can be some other kind of agreements. But this is still something that there isn't kind of a Maker Governance decision on, but that's clearly the direction I think we should go in. So it's like, yeah, if MakerDAO funds something, it should also be assured that MakerDAO can utilize it going forward, no matter whether that the core unit that created that continues to be a core unit or not.
Yeah, makes sense. And related to that, Khan is asking, how does the foundation verify that the core units are actually contributing their IP to the foundation? So what happens when a core unit is offboarded?
Well,
so I think this has a lot. We had some cases where we're not sure if, I don't know, a core unit that comes in and are being funded by the protocol, they're actually giving the IP to the Maker Foundation. This happened with the core unit that was offboarded, that they actually sold the domain when it was bought with money from the protocol. So what happens in those cases?
Yeah, and there's two things, and again, has been on our backlog for a time. One thing is the first thing I would say is to actually kind of make sure audit new core unit proposals, to actually kind of make sure that in what's coming in the core unit proposal, that the core unit also commits to kind of deliver their IP to where it should, and kind of make sure that's unambiguous. But then we have had this period where there was this kind of limbo where Maker Foundation was shutting down, some other things happened, and for various reasons, there was also some of the assets that could not be utilized right away. So people went out and found other solutions. And in that, we certainly also now will go back and kind of start asking people nicely to kind of hand over what clearly is Maker IP, for example, Maker name domains and stuff like that, and we certainly have to find a way where whatever has been invested in also is compensated to the given core unit. So that's something we will start, but again, for the long view, it is really about making sure that when a core unit kind of is accepted, or when they have a new budget, that it's quite clear how that core unit also will deal with its IP.
Makes sense. This is a bit changing topic, but Tyler from Go Alpha is asking, does the Dai Foundation have an opinion on potential future of a multi-DAI protocol, for example, EuroDAI, and if they have any concerns brand-wise regarding that potential future?
Well, it comes back to whether if this is Maker governance approved, then we certainly just and again, there's no conflict in that creator for. Then we just say this is part of the MakerDAO, and then there is no issue. However, if it was a totally new DAO that suddenly said we will create EuroDAI, then we would go and make sure that they could not use that name.
But I guess, Søren, to the point of the Dai Foundation, if we could imagine a scenario where that scenario is unfolded in a say disruptive manner, where there is, let's say, a conflict between two, let's say, competing protocols, then the Dai Foundation would have to get involved, correct? I mean, it's in this scenario, if the development community decide to go in a certain direction, even though it's controversial, that has nothing to do with the Dai Foundation's purpose. It's only in the case where there is a dispute. So maybe, Søren, we should be clear in the sense of
whatever Maker governance decides to do, and that means whatever MakerDAO decides to do, that's something we kind of will not make any objections toward.
Yeah, and we will not form an opinion, right? Because it's not our role to form an opinion. It's our role to govern if things goes off track, and then we have to step in.
Yes, that's a good point, Henrik. Which also, when we had the meetings for the core unit originally, it's not like the Dai Foundation is a high court for anything like that. The goal is again for Dai Foundation to do as little as possible until it really is called upon to assure the IP.
Yeah, and a way to view it, at least that's how I view it, is that doesn't matter if there is, let's say, a lot of discussion and conflicts, and suddenly things move in one direction or the other. The Dai Foundation should not form an opinion. But in the case where it's no longer a decentralized theme, but it actually affects our centralized assets, like the domain. I mean, is the domain pointing in a direction or the other direction? Then the centralized asset suddenly becomes important to steer and guide a direction, right? Otherwise, the Dai Foundation should, in principle, refrain from having an opinion or affecting any particular opinion in the community. Wouldn't you say, Søren?
Absolutely, and I have had several people ask me, why don't you say anything on all these governance meetings? And that's exactly because, it's not for Dai Foundation to kind of sit and be wise on different topics, unfortunately.
Yes.
No,
regarding the membership of the Dai Foundation, Tadeu is asking if core unit members can be board members, and maybe you can speak a bit to well, I guess it goes back to the conflict of interest and the neutrality side. How would the Dai Foundation manage having a a member or a core unit member as a member?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and then the rest of the board can follow through. So conflict of interest happens all the time. It happens in boards. I mean, just look at Elon Musk and what he does. What is important with conflict of interest is that it has to be transparent to the board. What cannot happen is that there is, let's say, a conflict of interest which is not visible. If there is a conflict of interest, then that individual person would need to step out of any decisions which relate to such matter where there is a conflict of interest. I can say for my own sake, we built Coinify, and at one point I was employed with Nets, and then Nets enters into a strategic partnership with Coinify, and I get a call from a Nets employee saying, what do you think about Coinify? Of course, I'm conflicted, right? I'm a founder of the company, so I cannot comment. And that is a scenario where I need to, let's say, be transparent about it. But it so happened that Nets actually established a partnership, and every time that was up for discussion in the board in Coinify, I stepped out of the room. Everybody knew that I was conflicted in relation to discussions or decisions or anything. And as long as a conflict of interest is transparent and put on the table, then that is enough, right? Of course, you can have a situation where it's blatantly influences a person's decision power, but then it's up for the rest of the board to inform the board member that there is a conflict of interest and they cannot be involved. But it starts with transparency. Over to you, Søren or Payam.
Payam, have you anything to add here?
Yeah, I mean, one quick thing here. I mean, and I totally agree with Henrik, especially in a sector like the crypto sector where things can just explode, and with the level of transparency we're working under, this is like highly this is like extremely important for us to be transparent. Can a core unit be a board member? I will let you and Peter comment further, but one important thing here that people should keep in mind is that if you want to enter in the foundation's board, we need all your KYC papers, and you will be registered with the Danish Foundation authorities. Your name will be public in the Danish registers. We need to know your full name, your full address, so forth.
That's a very good point. But otherwise, I will refer back to the points that Henrik went through in the slides. You know, if you kind of are equipped and can cover a part of what the board needs, you know, then we don't shut out anyone. So in that sense, yeah, I hopefully we're inclusive.
Nice, thank you for that. And the last question that we have is from Kianga, one of our delegates, and she's asking regarding the grants that you mentioned. So is there any information about the foundation grants and application process on a website posted publicly, or is it something that still needs to be, the details need to be worked out?
It's still in process. So once we have the call for grants formulated, we will publish it on the forum and potentially also on the website and in other channels where we think those who would like to respond to the grant are active. So yeah, but right now, yeah, unfortunately, there is nowhere where you can see additional details.
Can I perhaps add one more comment for the previous question? Because in Denmark and in the Foundation Act in Denmark, you have a principle of arm's length between the foundation and the founder of that foundation. This means that if you are in any way, closely related to the founder, I know this is hard as the Maker Foundation was dissolved some time ago, but if you are still in some way closely related to that foundation, we would need to stick to the arm's length principle.
Sounds good. Søren and well, I don't know if the rest of the team would like to be reached out, but what's the best way for the community to reach out, ask questions? I guess in the public Discord channel.
Yes,
we're in the forum. We are. Shoot us an email. We have foundation emails, all of us. We are reading on the Discord on a daily basis. I don't think the problem will ever be to get in contact with us.
So
we're online, so
my preference is either ping us on Discord in the Dai Foundation public channel, or write in the forum. And again, it really depends a little bit on if it's in relation to, for example, the quarterly update, then please put a comment in below that. If it's something where there isn't any topic to kind of assign it to, either the Discord, or you can write to us on the forum. And in this spot on call, you also could see the tag of these board members, and the fourth board member is Wouter, which I guess most of you also know how to find.
Yeah, and then there is some good information on the website as well. So if you want to understand more about the purpose and principles.
Absolutely, sounds good. So thanks again, Payam, Hans, and Søren for being here with us. It was great having you as always. Thank you, Retro, for the great screen management, and the community for attending and for the great questions. It was great having you.
And thanks for coming with questions and participation, and look forward to hear from you in the future.
Perfect. See you everyone at forum.makerDAO.com. Have a nice one.